Hi everybody, welcome to our first virtual lesson. We're going to be moving into the book Shape Up, and we're going to do section 1.1 today, which is about angles and parallel lines. Let's get started with a warm-up. Leah's little brother was watching her draw angles. He said that the angle on the left was bigger. Leah told him that actually the angles were the same size. Her brother didn't understand. How could Leah explain to her brother that the angles were the same size? Go ahead and take a moment, pause the video right here, and submit your answer to me using the link in the video description below. Okay, let's get started with our lesson. So this is going to be just like class. You should have your notebook out, and you're going to take notes when I'm writing in blue. All right, so we are going to be covering section 1.1. This is angles and parallel lines. And before we really get started, I want to go over some terminology. The date today is 3/18/20. So some terminology. When we talk about angles, we need to know how to name them. So if I have this angle right here, this angle might have a letter right there. It also might have 3 letters. We might have a point up here, A, one down here, B, and another one over here, C. So we can call this angle over here angle A, but we have to be careful over here. We want to be as descriptive as possible. So we want to either name this angle A, B, C, or we can also name it angle C, B, A. And we just want to make sure that we have B in the middle because that's the vertex of our angle. One other piece of terminology is sometimes we talk about angles as being congruent. And this means that they have the same angle measure. So it looks like up here, these angles look like they could be congruent. They could have the same angle measure. So we would say that angle A is congruent to angle ABC. And the way that we show this is with a little squiggly line over an equal sign. That means congruent. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some different types of angles. So sometimes we talk about angles as being supplementary. And this means that if I have 2 or more angles that add up to 180 degrees, we call them supplementary. So we can say that these are angles whose sum, meaning adding together, is 180 degrees. So let's see some examples. Let's say that I have 2 right angles. So this angle right here, let's call it angle P, and let's say I also have angle Q. It might be turned a little bit, that's okay. It's still 90 degrees. Angle P and angle Q are supplementary to each other, meaning that they add up to 180 degrees. I can also have angles like this. Let's say I have a straight line, and then I have an angle coming off of it like that. Let's call it angle 1, and this angle 2. Angles 1 and 2 are supplementary to each other because when we add them up, they equal 180 degrees. So this is what it means to be supplementary. We can also have angles that are complementary, and this is complementary, not complementary, meaning these angles are not going to tell each other that they look nice today. So these angles are going to be ones that add up to 90 degrees. So this is angles whose sum is 90 degrees. Oops. So let's say I have this angle right here. We can call this one angle, let's say angle 5. And let's say I also have angle 6. When I add the measures of these 2 angles together, I would get 90 degrees, or something very close to it here. So we would say that angle 5 and angle 6 are complementary to each other. All right, let's move on to 2 other types of angles, and then we'll take a break. Another type of angle that we might see is called a straight angle, and it looks like exactly what it sounds like. So straight angle. A straight angle is one that looks like this. Straight line, let's say I have B in the middle. let's say I have A over here, C over here, the angle at B would be 180 degrees. So straight angles are always 180 degrees. And we would say angle ABC is a straight angle. We also might see vertical angles. Vertical angles are formed when I have two lines that intersect each other. So let's say I have this line coming through like that, this line coming through like that. The angles that are right across from each other, let's say this one and this one, these are vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent to each other. So those two angles are congruent to each other. We also have these angles over here, and I'm going to write them with two lines so that they're not the same as our original angles. These two are also vertical angles to each other. So these are angles with the same vertex. That means this point right here in the middle, and they're always congruent. Okay, time for a wellness break. Let's get out of our chairs, stand up, and do 50 jumping jacks. Okay, let's get back to it. Let's talk a little bit about parallel lines. So if I have a line, let's call it L, this line L, and I have a line parallel to it, we'll call this M. I can show that these two are parallel by drawing little arrowheads like that. I can also show that they're parallel by saying L is parallel to, with these two lines, M. And this tells me that these two lines are parallel. I then might choose to draw what's called a transversal between them. So I might call this extra line T. This is a transversal. And this just means that this line crosses these two parallel lines so that it creates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 angles. And these angles each have different characteristics. So let's go into them together. Okay, so let's say I have my two parallel lines here, L and M, and I have my transversal T creating all of these different angles in here. Let's talk about 4 different types of pairs of angles that we're going to see. So the first type here is called alternate interior angles. And let's identify what pairs in here are alternate interior angles. So when we talk about alternate, we mean kind of opposite sides of something. And when we talk about interior, we're talking about something on the inside. So we are going to be talking about angles on the inside of our parallel lines and on opposite sides of our transversal. So that means let's look at 3, 4, 5, and 6 and see which ones are kind of on opposite sides of the transversal here. So angle 4 and angle 5 fit these descriptions, and angle 3 and angle 6 do also. Those are our 2 pairs of alternate interior angles here. And let's look. What do these angles have in common? Let's take a look here. So angle 3 and angle 6 are congruent to each other, and angle 5 and angle 4 are as well. So alternate interior angles are congruent, and you can put a little congruent sign over here for yourself. Let's look at another type of angle. So we can also have same side. Same side. This is a little laggy today. Interior angles. And these are also going to be angles on the inside, but they're going to be pairs that are on the same side of the transversal. So that's going to be angles 4 and 6. And it's also going to be angles 3 and 5. And clearly, these are not congruent to each other. We've already established that. But what do they have in common? Well, when you add them up, they add up to 180 degrees. Do you remember what that's called? These angles are supplementary. And I'm just going to write sup down here. So alternate interior angles are congruent, same side interior angles are supplementary. Let's look at two more kinds here. Another pair of angles we can see are alternate exterior angles. So now we're not going to be talking about angles on the inside of the parallel lines. We're going to be looking at angles maybe 1 and 2, 7 and 8, and we also want ones that are on opposite sides of that transversal. So this is going to be angle 1 and 8, angle 1 and angle 8, and angle 2 and angle 7. And what do you think? Do these look congruent to each other or not? I believe that they do. So angle 2 is congruent to angle 7, angle 1 is to angle 8. Alternate exterior angles are also congruent. The last type of angle we're going to look at are called corresponding angles, and these are actually my favorite type of angles. So these ones, are ones that look just like one another. Corresponding angles. So let's just take any angle on here. I'm going to take angle 3. So angle 3 here looks just like this. It has that kind of angle down to the bottom right. Do you see any other angle that looks just like it? Name something different. I see angle 7 down here. These two angles look the same. They are corresponding. So angle 3 and angle 7. Let's see if we can name a few other pairs here. Angle 2 up here in the upper left looks like angle 6. So angle 2 and angle 6 are corresponding. There are two more pairs here. Angle 4 and angle 8. And finally, angle 1 and angle 5. And these ones are also congruent to one another. This brings us to the end of our lesson. Thank you so much for joining me. Go ahead and check your email, make sure that you know what our homework is, and the IXL sections that I'd like you to do. Thanks for tuning in. I will see you next time.